All right, thank you again for showing up for this one. I'm going to take what Rich has talked about and use sort of a case study of work that I've been doing for a while now. I've worked with elephants for about 24 years and worked in Africa for about the last 15 or 20. And so I'm going to use sort of a case study of how to use a conservation behavior approach in dealing with the human-elephant conflict issue. So the points that I'll make as sort of a general outline, not just the case study, is that when you're dealing with a human-wildlife conflict type issue, you need to try to identify the conflict, understand the human concerns and the population of humans that you're dealing with. So in response to John's question, I'd say, yeah, we got to know human behavior. You need to know the legal, economic, cultural. You need to know all the constraints involved. You should know your species really well, because if you don't understand your species, it's hard to use the species behavior to problem solve. So you have to have a good ecological and behavioral understanding of your species. And then you have to put those two together and sort of decide, is a conservation behavior approach appropriate in this given situation? It may not be. There may be other levels of solutions that you don't really need to be involved in. Then if you're going to use that approach, you have to assess the solution set. So who needs to change? Sometimes it's really all humans. Sometimes it's humans and animals. Sometimes it's just animals. So you have to figure that one out. And then you're doing a service to some degree for both the animals and the people. So you have to figure out the time scale. How much is this going to cost? How long is it going to work? If it's going to work for one day, it might not be a very viable solution. If it's going to work for 100 years, they might love you, right? So you got to understand that time scale for the solution set. So human-wildlife conflict occurs around the world. We tend to think of it in terms of vertebrates, and we tend to really think about it in terms of birds and mammals. Poisonous snakes don't get a lot of work and things like that. Shark attacks don't get a lot of work in terms, we don't think about that too much. Insect pests we don't really consider at all, although they can be the biggest problem, in a lot of places. So we tend to think about it with our birds and mammals. In terms of elephants, human-elephant conflict, where elephants exist, is one of the biggest problems, both in physical size and in detriment that they do, and crop raiding is the most pervasive of those. So these are people who are poor subsistence farmers for the most part, and their livelihoods are dependent upon the food that they raise in their own backyard. In terms of looking at the animal involved, we're talking about, we'll deal with two species, there's probably really three, but we'll deal with the Savannah elephant and the Asian elephant. They're both threatened or endangered. So legally, there's a bunch of constraints as to what you can do in terms of modifications of their behavior. We're dealing with populations, this is in Africa, you can find some of the same stats for Asia, that are typically fairly poor. They're doing better, they're growing economically, they're getting better resources, but they do not have a lot of leisure time or leisure money. So they don't have extra bucks to pull out of their bank account to put towards your solution set. You have to understand that from the start. So this is just showing over the decades and showing their income per head and their economics growth. So it's getting better, but if you look at the dollar value over there, that's not multiplied by like 10,000 or anything. That's actual dollars, We also have to look at their cultural value. The two species actually differ quite a bit in that regard. Asian elephants are in high regard in Asian society. They're gods. They've been part of the culture of Asian society for thousands and thousands of years. People want to live with elephants. That's their goal. African societies, not so much. If they weren't there, they really wouldn't mind for the vast majority of sub-Saharan Africa. So you're dealing with different cultural mores and values when you walk into the problem, and just translating one from one continent to the other is not going to work. Those numbers are ballpark numbers now, but African elephants are anywhere from 350,000 to 700,000. They've dropped hugely in the last several decades, but we're dealing with range compression, less places for the animals to go, more human fences, not physical fences, just human society surrounding where they used to go. Oops, sorry. This is a chart from National Geographic, and what it's showing you is what the cause of death is in African elephants, and the dark red elephants are poached elephants. So what you can see is the vast majority of deaths occurring to elephants in Africa is not through natural causes, and that death varies depending on where you are on the continent. So in southern Africa, there's better control, there's more money, there's bigger parks. There's a lot going on. East Africa, a lot of action there. Central Africa, a lot of problems dealing with that. So you can't, again, bring the same solution set to each area because the people are different. You have to understand the animal society. So elephants are a matriarchal society. They're long-lived. They live 60, 70 years. The males disperse. They live solo. They're 12,000 pounds. They eat a lot. They eat all the time, and they have big ranges. Females are raising the young. They care for the young. They stay with the young. They can't travel as far. They're going to be much more cautious. So you have animals with different attitudes walking into whether they're going to be a crop raider or not. They're also ecosystem engineers, so they're highly valuable to the place that they live, but that also means that they're vying for some of the same resources, namely wood, that humans are vying for. So they're problematic in that way. So we can ask the question, is this a good situation to try to use conservation behavior? Well, one of the things that we want to know is, what do people think of elephants where we're working? So we've done work in Eastern Africa. When we think about you folks, most of you would look at the bottom picture and say, isn't that a cute animal? And you'd look at those guys on the left and you go, wow, they're impressive. People on the bottom right are going, there's 70 years of problems coming ahead. And on the left, they're going to kill me and eat my crops. So a completely different perception. We did work in Tanzania in which we asked people, what causes damage to your crops? Invariably, they said elephants were the biggest cause of problems. Despite all these other animals, including their own livestock, that could wander into their crops pretty much any time because they're not well fenced. When we actually went out and measured what was causing damage to the crops, elephants were on the low end of the spectrum. They weren't actually a major player in their crops. When we When we added these up, it was actually water that was the biggest problem. Okay? And these are even people that had irrigation systems but would forget to turn the pipes and get the water running from Kilimanjaro and stuff. The place where they're right is that when you look at something that can cause the most damage in the shortest period of time, it's elephants. Elephants are the plane crash. They're not the car accident. If you think about, if I said, would you rather be in a car accident or a plane crash, you'd probably all say car accident, because you have at least think you're going to live through that. Plane crashes, you're probably dead. That's how they view elephants. Elephants are their plane crash. They can wipe out their entire 6 months worth of crops in one night. So when we try to think about how we're going to stop crop raiding and bring a conservation approach to this, we need to know all that information. We need to know that these guys are active at night when people are typically asleep. They come alone, they come in groups. This is a really dangerous time to go out and watch elephants, okay? And we could resort to shooting them, right? Which is a common response. Shoot the elephants. It's not really a conservation behavior approach. And unless you know exactly that that's the elephant causing the problem, it's really not going to solve your problem. But it mollifies people. Traditionally, people have used all sorts of means to try to keep elephants out of their crops. Most of these elephants habituate to or figure out how to get around, so they're not long-term sustainable solutions. What we try to do as behaviorists is bring in and understand, well, first of all, what are the animals doing in their world? What are their senses? If we're going to try to use deterrence, how are they going to detect them? How are they going to respond to them? What's their capability for learning? And it's really high in elephants. What modern techniques that we can bring into play, bringing the humans into it that are going to resist the habituation by the animals, but also be affordable and practical and safe for the people. So what do we do when we think about predators? We think about bees. We think about all these different things that we might use. The fences work really well, but they're too expensive and they prevent wildlife from moving. So they're not a viable solution in that habitat. In Asia, we've actually been working with elephants in which we're trying to use their own communication systems to modify their behavior in a typical pest management type strategy known as push-pull. They do this with insects all the time. You try to give them something that drives them out of the crops and attracts them to the good habitat. With Asian elephants, we actually have two chemicals that we know are pheromones. And so the idea is, can we do something with their own communication system to get them to move where we want? but there's going to be no silver bullet. This isn't going to work by itself, but it could add to the solution set. So what we've been doing now in Africa is a project funded by Earthwatch, a citizen science, as well as the International Elephant Foundation. We've been doing in an area where there's between Tsavo East and Tsavo West, those blue lines are experimental crop fields. The purple is a wildlife corridor between Tsavo East and Tsavo West. All the orange are villages where people raise crops. So you can see the proximity of the problem. What we're doing is we're going into schools, we're talking to children, we're talking to teachers, we're trying to educate them about elephants and the value of elephants so there's an appreciation. We're trying to change perception through education. We're also doing experiments. We're testing different deterrents. We're doing experimental fields. We're collecting data. We have controls. We have matched controls. We have multiple plots. We have them spread out over areas. We're hiring farmers to get involved. Thank you. We're incorporating the people into the solution set, into the experiments. Simon is a student who got his master's where I'm at Western Kentucky University. He's now a major player in the field. He helped develop this fence behind me at the bottom. It's a metal strip fence. It's metal that's easily affordable there. They use it for their roofs all the time. And we cut it, we put it on wire. It makes noises, it reflects light. It's a little bit sharp. Elephants don't really like it. First set of trials on that, it was the statistically best deterrent that we've tried. So far it's working. We've actually named it after Simon, Cassiani Fence. So these are our experimental plots. This is the type of stuff that we're doing on a landscape level, multiple fields all over the place to try to really nail it down. We put camera traps out so we can record the behavior because most of them are coming at night. We go out, we track what the elephants do, we go into the fields and we measure what the causes of damage are because it's not just elephants. So we can attribute how much damage is going on by the elephants. We keep track of other animals. We found out through this study that eland also are a major crop raider and no one really knew that. It's not in the literature. The farmers didn't really think about it, but they're also causing a lot of problems. And we're bringing this into a structure, what's known as climate smart agriculture. So it's a holistic approach to try to change the way the humans in that area value their resources, value their land, and use their landscape. So it's not just animal problem solving, but it's holistic into their whole culture. It's a complete approach. So coming back, these are the major points. I think for elephants right now, we're probably down into an arms race. Every time we come up with a solution, elephants are going to probably come up with a counter problem. It's going to be a long-term thing. But every time we can prevent humans from having to physically be involved and not get killed and that kind of stuff by being out there, the longer that solution set will last. And hopefully we'll just keep learning. And we have the question that was here before about can we couch this? Man, I've been trying to do this with NSF for years and saying these are great chemoorganisms or all this stuff. We should do pure science and at the same time, maybe someday I'll sell it. So we'll see. I'll let you know. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.